Hi, everybody. Today we have a book for all baseball lovers. You never heard of Sandy Koufax? And it's written by Jonah Winter and Andre Cajillo. You want to see some of the pages that are prior to the first page? Here you go. And, all right, page 1. You got to be kidding. You never heard of Sandy Koufax? He was only the greatest lefty who ever pitched in the game of baseball. Well, for 6 years he was anyways, from 1961 to 66. Almost no one could hit the guy. The mighty Mickey Mantle, one of the greatest power hitters of all times. Woof. I think that's like a strike. Where's that? Right there. After the Mick struck out one day, he turned to the catcher and said, "What the heck was that?" The wallopin' Willie Stargell, who slammed 475 homers, with hitting a Koufax fastball, Willie said, is like trying to drink coffee with a fork. Even Willie Mays may be the greatest all-around player in the history of the majors. Whiff. For 6 years, Koufax stood on the pitcher's mound like a prince, and when you look at that serious mug of his, you could tell he was gonna beat you. So a mug is like a picture. Yeah. Back when Koufax was a kid and growing up Jewish in Brooklyn, no one would have guessed that he was about to become. No one would have guessed what he was about to become. He was supposed to be a doctor or a lawyer. Problem was, Sandy was a whiz at every sport he played. The first time he made the newspapers, it was on account of basketball. In a game between his high school team and the New York Knicks, the big guys actually had to knock him down to stop him from scoring. But even though Sandy didn't care much about baseball back then, or so they say, there were rumors that this Jewish kid named Sandy Koufax could throw as hard as a pro. It didn't take long for the major league scout to start sniffing around Diker Field, where Sandy was pitching to his pals in sandlot games. So here he is playing basketball, and here are the scouts on Diker Field. One day, one of our scouts, Al Campanis, invites Sandy to Ebbets Field, home of our team, the Brooklyn Dodgers, so he can see the hot shot pitch. After batting just one time against him, Campanis has seen enough. He said to Sandy, "Kid, how do you like to play for us? Don't think too hard." Quick as you can say, Jackie Robinson, this 19-year-old squirt, was wearing Dodgers blue and earning more dough than some of us old-timers. Turns out Sandy earned most of it just warming the bench. See, he was new, a rookie, and rookies are known to lose a lot. It was 1955, and the Dodgers had a shot to win the pennant. The kid was too big a risk, and most every time our manager Alston and most every time our manager Alston did let Sandy pitch, the rookie was unpredictable, all over the map. He could throw strikes, but mostly he was nowhere near the strike zone. He could tell we could tell he was throwing too hard, and when you overthrow, you lose control, and when you lose control, you walk guys. To make matters worse, Sandy kept to himself. He never said nothing to nobody. I'm reading exactly how it's written. He never even cursed or argued with umps, and let me tell you, that ain't the best way to make friends on a ball club. So, back before Sandy Koufax became the Sandy Koufax, some of the guys didn't like him. Not to mention, he was one of the only Jews in baseball in those days. Some of the guys said some pretty lousy things behind his back, things I can't repeat. If Sandy ever heard 'em, he never let on. But maybe that's one reason he threw too hard, to prove he was better than every one of those so-sos. Then in 57, to make a long story longer, the Dodgers moved to LA. Yeah, that's right. Some genius decided to move us to California. Can you believe that? We've been the Brooklyn Trolley Dodgers. Now what are we now what were we dodging? Palm trees? Meanwhile, the other teams were busy dodging Sandy's pitches. In 58, he threw more wild pitches than any other guys in baseball. And after Cubs hurler Sam Jones, he walked the most batters in the National League. So here is the LA Coliseum. That's when the Dodgers moved there. And I think that's where they played first, before Dodger Stadium was built. And then here he is in 1958. If you ask me, Sandy was never going to get any better unless he got more practice. He knew it too. In 1960, he goes up to the general manager, Buzzy Bavazzi, and says, "Buzzy, train me or let me pitch." Could have been the most, he said, in 5 years. So Buzzy listens. Who knows why? He put Sandy in the regular starting rotation that includes Don Drysdale. Drysdale was this big, hard-throwing California boy. He was an ace, and we all thought he might show Sandy how to relax. But it made no difference. Koufax ended the season with 13 losses and only 8 wins. Now you know what Sandy does? He throws his uniform in the trash, the pants, the blue socks, the number 32 jersey, says nothing to nobody, just leaves. Quitsville. We figure he was tired of losing, but the thing is, Sandy never struck us as a quitter. The day he left, a bunch of the guys placed bets on whether he'd be back next season. Those of us who bet he'd be back well, we made a few bucks. Come spring training, who do you think shows up with a sheepish grin on his face? That's right, Kawano, the equipment manager, hands Sandy his uniform, which he yanked from the trash, and says, "Here, I thought you might be needing this." If this was a fairy tale, Sandy would have magically been great now, but this wasn't no fairy tale, and before spring training was even over, he was pitching nothing but wild stuff again. Then in this one preseason game against the Twins, he walked 3 guys in a row and loaded the bases. Norm Sherry, the catcher, comes out to the mound. You can guess exactly what he's telling Sandy. "Kid, just put it over the plate. Let him hit it. You got 9 guys on this team who can field." Of course, Sandy's heard this 100 times from Alston, from Drysdale, from other catchers, and he's always nodding. But this time he's looking like he's really hurted. Something's different. Maybe he's standing up a little straighter. Maybe he's turned into a statue for a couple of minutes. The bases are loaded, but Koufax didn't seem at least a bit nervous. He don't look worried. He don't even look like Koufax. Look at that picture. Look at this illustration. That's nice. That's a nice drawing, don't you think? It's perspective, right? He goes into his windup, leans way back, keeping his eye on Sherry's mitt, and fires a rocket right over the plate. Strike! I could hear it's the fastest pitch Sandy Koufax has ever thrown. And then he strikes out the next two batters. Bim, bam, boom. Down in the dugout, Alston turns to me and says, "Did you see what I just seen?" "Who is that guy out there?" "Well, I was just wondering the same thing." And for the rest of the day, Sandy was an ace pitcher. He struck out 8 guys and threw a no-hitter, and the Dodgers won the game. And it didn't stop there. From then on, Koufax was a strikeout machine. And at the end of 61, the end of 1961, Sandy had broken the National League record with 269 strikeouts. The rest, as they say, is history. For 6 golden years, game after game, Koufax goes to the mound and strikes out guy after guy. Game after game, he goes out and throws so hard his hat falls off. And game after game, he threw so hard his elbow swells to the size of a grapefruit. It's so sore, he's got to stick it in a bucket of ice when he's done pitching. Game after game, he's got to take so many painkillers he can hardly stand up. But Koufax does keep standing, and he keeps throwing strikes. How do you go from being nobody special to being the Sandy Koufax? What happened out on the pitching mound that cold March day? Nobody really knows, but with Sandy, nothing ever added up. Just when you thought you were starting to understand him, he'd haul off and throw you a curve, like this one. It's the first game of the 1965 World Series, which falls on a Jewish high holy day, and it's Sandy's turn to pitch. But Sandy, he's nowhere near the ballpark. Why? Because if you're Jewish, you ain't supposed to work on a high holy day. Sandy sits out the game to show he's proud to be Jewish and to set a good example. But when it seems like pitching is all he cares about, Koufax proves everyone wrong and becomes an even bigger hero to American Jews. And just when he's at the peak of his game, the guy retires. You should have seen it when he made the announcement. A room full of reporters' mouths fell open. It made no sense. But if you thought about it, it made perfect sense. And Sandy had a choice. He could retire or he could lose the use of his left arm. And he didn't want to lose that arm. Yes, sir. Folks are still scratching their heads over Sandy. For 6 years, he put us all in a trance. Teammates, batters, fans. In those split seconds when he arched his back and stretched his legs across the mound, his arm about to whip the ball into another world, he was like the Greek god of baseball. Who was Sandy Koufax? Sandy Koufax was a guy who finally relaxed enough to let his body do the one thing it was put on this earth to do. And what a thing of beauty that was. The end. And Sandy Koufax is still alive today. And you'll see him, I think he's at every Dodgers game. Okay. And then the next page, it gives you it's a glossary of baseball terms. You've heard stuff like AB is at bat, average is batting average, and you've heard of MVP, most important, most valuable player. You've heard of RBI, runs batted in, strike zone, wind up from the stretch. They don't have the stretch in here, but I added that in. You've heard of shutout and no hitter, World Series. There you go. That's it. The end. See you next time.